We were, are, and will be until the end of the world on the native Chechen land of Ichkeria. Whether we are in Grozny, Gudermes, or Nazhavyurt, or in another area, it does not change the essence. We are home. The war, the most atrocious war seen by a human being since the times of Adam and Eve. No, I have no regrets whatsoever. But some principles have changed. One cannot say that I deeply hate something or someone, to nations or situations, but I have developed a sense of disgust towards certain professions, to all military professions, and in particular, to all military professions, and in particular to the Air Force. To peoples of the former USSR, I will wish nothing. They create their own destinies and bring upon themselves what they deserve. The peoples of the former or current or future Union, and in particular Russia, are sick with Russism. This is a very dangerous and chronic disease. Russism is scarier than fascism, Nazism, racism, and all misanthropic ideologies, whether they like it or not. And this terrible disease can probably only be cured by the most difficult trials. Probably the only people on earth that believe in nothing at all, without spirituality and morals, that is hopelessly behind in development compared to the rest of humankind, are Russians. They have no faith and are subject to no faith. They do not adhere to any spirituality or morals, and as a result, do not behave ethically. And this is to the great misfortune of the Russian people themselves on a great scale. What is going now, Chechnya, is only the pretext. It demonstrates the essence of the Russian people. Sick with Russism, a misanthropic ideology. And one must pay dearly for that. The trials that Russian people will have to face are very heavy, and the prognosis is unfavorable. The reasons for this are real. There is no ideal. Ideal of communism, socialism, or society of equal opportunity had burst like a soap bubble. All is because Russian society was being built on ideals of Russism. And since there is no ideal, there is no lawful state of Russia. There is no legitimacy of the state, neither of any branch of power. And since there is no ideal nor legitimacy of the state and any of its branches of power, there is no place for politics, neither internal nor external. And since there is no third component, there is no place for ideology. And so there are no motives nor stimuli, and that is where the future ends. This is one way of evolution of human civilization. The other way is through spirituality. Russians are non-religious. They believe neither in Christ, nor Muhammad, nor Buddha, nor anyone or anything else. But it takes at least 3 generations of purposeful work for a whole people to become spiritual. And this path is also closed. Where does one get ideals for such a huge mass of people? One may take the path of the West, to make one's ideal, one's God, a dollar. It is a dead end in this case. When political power is being reconfigured in the absence of a legitimate government, independent and functioning branches of power, and reprivatization of state property, such idea is so dangerous that people will turn to stones or rifles or rockets, as the case may be, to settle the disputes. In other words, it would quickly lead to a civil war. This path is also closed. So both paths of spirituality and new idealism are closed. Currently, politicians and ideologists are trying to choose the third way of Slavonization, to unite on the basis of Slavism. This will also fail because the most important component of Slavonization, Ukrainians, will never agree to be Russified, nor will they agree to the Russism. There is only one path of development of the Russian state and people, but I will not tell you what it is. But we have the key to it. Do you remember how, for the last time in the former USSR, you celebrated the Victory Day? Of course, I remember. I was in charge of garrisons in 3 districts. The victory over the misanthropic ideology of fascism was certainly one of the greatest achievements of the civilized world. But unfortunately, while defeating fascism, humanity was giving birth to Russism, while the world was watching. When the whole civilized world was fighting this plague, paying a huge price in human casualties and destructions, at this very time in Russia, millions of people were being killed because of their ethnicity or religious beliefs. In just one pit, there were buried 12,000 best sons of Europe and light of civilization Polish officers. A whole 40,000 strong Polish army was destroyed. They spared only one regiment. Millions of people were deported and destroyed from their lands according to their ethnic principle, among them the whole Chechen people. We lost 2/3 of our nations in this ugly, disgusting birth of the Russist ideology. Russism began to gain force by realistically threatening the whole world with its military, demonstrating its cruelty. By choosing the weakest and least defended as its victims, Russia, throughout almost all of its history, demonstrated its cruelty and Russism. Let's remember 1944. The war was barely over when millions of people were killed or deported. A huge concentration camp was built in a vast geopolitical space. Soon after, they started a war against Iran, but got rebuffed in 52-53. Then the Hungarians rebuffed them in 1956, then Czechoslovaks in 1968, and after that Yugoslavia, and so on. And then the war in Afghanistan, then Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Abkhazia, Southern Ossetia, Ingushetia, Northern Ossetia, Moldova, Pridnestrovia, Transnistria, the Baltic states, and Tajikistan. And so the destruction of peoples and civilization was unleashed. And not a single man, industrial, opportunist, or sheer criminal from the top echelons of power that committed the most grave crimes against humanity was held responsible. And the appetite grew and brought about this current situation in Chechnya, and not a single responsible is held accountable. And may I assure you that while those responsible for senseless people slaughters, cruelty, and cynicism that give birth to unrepairable evil on earth are not punished, and while they will not feel the inevitability of punishment, Russia's misfortunes will grow by the hour. These same opportunist politicians have destroyed the Soviet army that was seen as a foundation of peace and the defender of interests of the 300 million civilians of the Soviet Union. These same people are sophisticated criminals of the disgustingly hawkish animal kind. They destroy just for the sake of destruction, using all types of military hardware, weapons of mass destruction, demonstrating their cruelty towards civilian population. Those veterans of war and work that achieved this victory by their suffering and hoped that at least they will be able to finish their old age by natural death on this land. We are not only unable to bury them with dignity, we cannot even recover their bodies from rubble. This is a degree of degradation of the Soviet army. I am deeply hopeful that the veterans of the armed forces do not identify themselves with these vandals, these criminals, and that they do not support this inhuman aggression, unheard of in history, due to its senselessness, cruelty, and cynicism that is being now committed by the Russian soldiers. It is probably because they destroyed the Soviet army and turned it into criminal bands mixed with the convicts and mercenaries. What was once the glory and pride of the 300 million Soviet people in the States, its Air Force and the Navy, have been turned into mere bandits and criminals. And no one is held accountable for this. And the appetites of the organized crime group in power are only growing and growing and growing. They will reach the point when these same criminals, these same armed forces that already fired on the Russian parliament will be killing, as they are now doing in Chechnya's Grozny, everyone, whether they be a Chechen or a Russian, Christian, a Muslim or Buddhist, in churches and mosques, using precision weapons from land and air. The pride of the nation is being destroyed. The veterans of work and war, veterans of the armed forces. And I ask forgiveness from these veterans for our inability to defend them. We did not expect the crime of such a scale, if they can. This is our tragedy of our government and me personally. We failed to defend them, and they're still lying under the rubble. And it is not known how many of them there are, where exactly they are, and how we can retrieve them, and how ask their forgiveness for this tragedy. In one of the recent editions of Vzglad, a very popular Soviet TV news program, Aslan Maskhadov remembered how they celebrated the victory date and paraded through the crowds of Lithuanians. Why do Estonians respect you, Dzhokhar Musaevich? You know, before I came to Estonia and other garrisons, why do you think only in Estonia? I worked a lot in Siberia and in all other districts where I served, in all detachments. I don't think you will be able to find neither family members of the servicemen nor citizens that lived and worked at military bases nor servicemen themselves that would relate to me negatively or that took offense over my actions. Everywhere I served, I fulfilled my duties with honesty and in good faith. In Estonia, there was a particular relationship between the military and civilians, a relationship of mutual hatred, mistrust. And in this situation, perhaps for the first time throughout all this Soviet period, both civilians and the military found mutual understanding and began to greet each other. Those people that for decades lived in the same apartment buildings, people should be probably treated as humans, not animals. Not from the point of view of Russianism, but from the point of view of benevolence and the law. And everything will be all right. There are no bad peoples. There is not a single bad people on the face of the earth. And those who were demonized are perhaps the most unfortunate peoples. There where there is a misanthropic ideology, there is always a need to camouflage it, to create some kind of a Sicilian mafia, or speculate on German fascism, whose back was broken by the whole world. For a long time, the Soviet Union and the Russianism speculated on this ground. When people got tired of it, they came up with the narrative of the Jewish Zionism. They started blaming the Jews and use every opportunity to attack them. Then this card became ineffective and they came up with a new myth, the Chechen mafia. This card also failed. The whole world saw that the mafia which they want to see in the Chechens is non-existent. There is now even the basis for it. The whole mafia is sitting in Moscow. Then they invented some sort of fundamentalism, but it also did not work. When all these tags failed and there was no other cards to be played in their misanthropic ideology, then who resisted it? Who prevented these tags to take root? Those who resisted, it had to be destroyed. That's why they began their offensive against the Chechens. The plan was, no Chechens, no problem. But we have a huge experience in dealing with this for over 300 years over the Russian treatment of Chechens, peoples of the Caucasus, and other people. Russia will not be able to deceive us, even though we are trusting. What works against us in our standoff with Russia? Our trusting, our generosity. These Russians abuse these qualities of ours while committing their new crimes. I cannot wait to see when the Chechens will respond to these negatives with the same token. Honestly speaking, I would like to see that Chechens and others will finally repay the Russians with what they deserve. Otherwise, they will not understand. Cruelty can only be stopped by cruelty. The war can only be counteracted with war. Look at what they do in villages, towns, in Grozny. The story of one single village of Samashki is enough for the whole world for the next 100 years. But maybe I foresee that the Chechens are beginning to overcome this syndrome as well. I just carefully analyzed the whole history of our relations with Russia. Once more, I went through Leo Tolstoy. I took his novel Haji Murat. I also took Bulgakov. He has a novel Khankal Ravine, where he was a participant of Russia's war against Chechnya in 19th, 20th centuries. Tolstoy, in his Haji Murat, mentions Meskeryurt, which is, by the way, in the same situation as back then, during the 150 years of war. The Russians committed there also the most cruel, even inhuman acts of cruelty. And Tolstoy writes that the Chechens regarded Russians with repugnance and disgust. It is with the same disgust that the Chechens are regarding Russians today. I caught myself with the same attitude towards them, repugnance and disgust. Somehow I don't feel anger towards them. They act like animals. So how do you react to an animal? Do you react with anger to an animal's actions? I see that I and all Chechens are looking at these Russians, these tattooed criminals, cheapskates, murderers. We look at them with disgust and repugnance and nothing else. A lot of time has passed since, and Chechens and Russians lived in one society. Did nothing change? No, nothing has changed, only that they unleashed all the potential of their cruel Russism on Chechens. The Russians are now naked in front of the whole world. Not only externally naked, but also they revealed the internal guts. The whole world has now seen what is Russian Russism and how dangerous it is for humanity. We should have fought not so much fascism but Russism at the time. Now this disease has become chronic. They are waging their black boxes with red buttons. It is that bad. Their hands are already reaching for the nuclear button. They parade. I recall the great son of the world, the scientist, who at the sight of the military man hammering pavement with their boots, I can't quote him precisely, but he said something to the effect of seeing the empty heads. And for some time now, I fully disregard military professions with disgust, utmost disgust. Do you remember parades in the country? I remember parades. I remember all of the parades. Were any excesses with Estonians? No excesses. I'll tell you that they met us, came to us to a holiday. For the first time in Tartu, we celebrated the Aviation Day all together. The Estonians cried. We opened all the doors, demonstrated our military planes. Guys explained the purpose of these planes, their technical specifications, in a pure Estonian language. We opened all the doors, including the canteens, barracks, museum, to demonstrate our potential. We prepared a true feast. Estonians were afraid to carry their national flag even in their pockets. But we, for the first time, flew their national flag 2 by 3 meters long on high, and the Estonian paratrooper jumped with it from 3,000 meters in the sky, and I could see a young family with a boy and the mother. And pointing to the flag, he said, "Look." So then we're jumping and crying out of joy, and so on. There were no excesses. Did you face disciplining for this? I didn't care even if I did. Of course, there were those who were not happy. There were demonstrations at the time. The airfield was huge, 11 kilometers in perimeter. So they would come at 5 o'clock in the morning with children on their shoulders and their hands to demonstrate against the military airfield and the military presence. So they decided to go around this whole airfield, and 2-3 hours found themselves stuck in the muddy forest, tired and exhausted. So I removed the barbed wire at that point, opened the door, and led them to the other side of the field where they were offered tea and kasha. Why do they need to suffer, hide in fear? And so the ice thawed, and they were no more against the military, since they felt no threat to their security, honor, dignity. We returned them their national museum and the park. From about the time of the Second World War, one of the most beautiful places in Estonia and patrimony of the Estonian people was turned into a dump. The military used it for storage of aviation equipment. Everything was in ruins, full of garbage. I suggested to restore the property and return it to them. Of course, at first they did not believe it, but when we quickly cleaned this land in return, as a gift, they built us new hangars of which we did not even dream. We returned the land, and there is even a photo where we planned the first street together with the director of the museum in the park. And it was all right. Nothing untoward happened. Of course, there were certain preparations against Estonia. At the time, the most pressure was planned for Estonia. A small republic, and anything could be done there. And when the sabotage and terrorism erupted, just as here and everywhere, that's how the KGB agents always begin, these dogs, hellhounds. Then I created a system, checkpoints, placed officers and soldiers, and publicly announced through the media that any terrorist, et agent provocateur, will be destroyed by direct fire to kill. And so I was able to cut short these developments. Of course, there were many other little measures taken to prevent the situation in Estonia from aggravation. Then these events migrated to Lithuania. But we had influence in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. I must say that the top command of the district and the commander-in-chief of the district did everything to create mutual understanding and prevent subversive actions of the KGB operatives. For this, the commander of the district himself lost favor and was transferred to a different place. They were looking to destabilize the situation, degrade the armed forces and good relationships with the local population, turn everything into chaos, bedlam. Both the commander and other commanding officers with whom I served were looking to stabilize the situation, maintain the law in relations with the population and regarding decisions about servicemen that was stationed there. But no one in the top echelons of power wanted that. They needed something else. And those who opposed their agenda were quickly removed, transferred, and so they created the situation in the military that we are now witnessing. The goal was to turn the army into a punishing army. And so the commander and the experienced top commanding officers, those who knew what the military is, what it is for, those highly disciplined, highly professional commanders were not wanted. Look at General Lebed now, for example. But back then, the treatment of those officers, generals that held their principles was even worse. The army had to be disarrayed, and it was being disarrayed by the foreign ministers who displaced the service personnel without providing new accommodations. Tens and hundreds of thousands of servicemen were left without the means to exist, left worthless. It was intentional. They wanted to create from the leftovers of the military typical punishers in the hands of the new political opportunists, and they did it with excellence. They brilliantly ruined the army, and everyone created himself punishing expeditionary forces. 7,000 accused criminals are now released from prison, turned into mercenaries, and sent to Chechnya. Look at their muzzles in the newspaper photos and materials that are now in possession of the prosecutor's office. They're tattooed, so precipitous, unbridled, on high, drunk. This is what has been done as a gift on occasion of commemoration of the 50th anniversary for the veterans of war and the armed forces, the current opportunists, leaders of all levels. During that service, did you have real holidays? I'll tell you what means real holidays. The real holiday was always the victory day, the true holiday, the day of victory over misanthropic ideology and plague. What higher holiday can there be? Of course, any holiday for a serviceman from private, but even more so commanding officers, meant a lot of work, responsibility and preparation, duty, military rituals. Overall, the military mechanism is very heavy. Everything needed to be well thought through to the minuscule details, considered, realized. Many thousands of people are involved in this or that action with different skill. It's a very complex mechanism. It was a responsibility, but also festive, celebratory, sincere holiday. There were also superfluous activities that had to be prepared to please someone. Either an inspection or a commission, but there were also genuine holidays. Will anything change if you are no longer there? If I'm no longer there? You know, I can assure you without exaggeration, not only nothing will change, the process itself will develop in the direction that I like to see it unfold, even to a greater degree. Toughening of Chechens? Yes, toughening of Chechens. They still trust in their mass, 90%. They believe, trust, and wait something from me, only for the best, only the good. But I cannot give them that for now because of such unbridled aggression. Everything is destroyed. Everything, from a kindergarten to university, from thimble manufacturing to heavy industry. Everything is destroyed. But even that is not the most important. The most important is that the faith in men is destroyed. The overall faith in humanity's ability to regulate relationships on the principles of spirituality, ethics, and morality is destroyed. We'll reject that because the other side is not abiding by them. The basic laws of human coexistence are destroyed. About 300,000 male citizens aged 17 to 50 are left without roof, without means to exist, without work, and without any future. They can only know how to fight now. They're learning how to fight well. Well, if I am gone, there will be no Dudaev factor, and what's next? I think that the inevitability of retribution for evil will just speed up and become massive and chaotic. Massive, chaotic, and accelerating character. Neither the Russian people nor their leadership are able to recognize the evil they have committed, are committing now, and intend to commit in the future. They want to drive us into shelter holes and then use weapons of mass destruction against us. But we will not simply wait for it. A war is an art, cruel but necessary in the given situation. That is why we are preparing for a long war. In a few villages, we saw the so called activists that were trying to come to an agreement with the Russian military. According to such an agreement, the Russians will stop bombing them, and in return, the locals will protect the Russians against the militants. All of this is a mere bluff in which no Chechen believes. Russia did not leave them even a shadow of trust to believe them. The Russians themselves know that this is a game, bluff, and this is yet another provocation. What comes out of it, you have probably seen already. Like in Samashki? Yes, like in Samashki, Bamut, Aleroy, and other villages, in Gudermes, Shali. You have probably seen for yourself and witnessed what comes out of these games. Of course, the plywood match factory is trying to justify all the resources consumed by its vast appetites. For already 4 years, they feed the Russian people in those echelons of power that encourage them, saying we are almost there, but still cannot deliver. The Russians made the announcement that they will finish the Chechen factor in 6 to 8 weeks, which is the sequential number of this announcement and the time frame. This is all because the Russian people is sick with Russism. They just can't wait to see the destruction of Dudaev. I do not even intend to comment such announcements and descend to the level of the Russian leadership that can blurt out obscenities to the whole world. Threats like Dudaev must be destroyed, Chechens must be destroyed. What sort of leaders are they? And what kind of people is it that allows their leaders to stoop so low? I would say to the level of a prison camp's bitches. And I assure you that the only power in Russia capable of subduing this mayhem are the thieves in law who have a code of conduct and stable principles and who are considerably more moral than the political leadership of Russia. They may overcome the mayhem and bring those responsible to accountability. So it is only for the thieves in law. There is no other power in Russia. Look at your Democrats. Look at Govorukhin, for example. He is an ordinary agent provocateur, or Yushchenkov, another agent provocateur. There are only a few names of people in Russia left who maintain their principles. They are Yelena Bonner, Valeria Novodvorskaya, a member of the State Duma Shabad, and my gut feeling that the life of this man is in danger, and there are reasons for this concern, and I would recommend him to leave this country the sooner the better. Poet Yevtushenko, who used to be and who remains to be a citizen with his positions and principles. There is no other person in today's Russia who adheres to democratic principles and principles as such. What about Kovalyov? Kovalyov is simply doing his job. That is his professional duty and nothing more. And we don't know how he would change once the Russia's ambitions overcome his professional duties. Have you spoken with Grachov since December? After December, no. The only time we met for the last time. And we have not spoken since then. Masharov said that he intended to bring you together. Bring together for what? I don't need to be brought together. If Grachov will produce his government-level negotiation credentials and decision powers, and these powers will be realized in the presence of observers, the international community, I do not have any aversion towards Grachov. He is a victim. He is a victim that will be sacrificed by the opportunist politicians, like a bull. He will be escorted and sacrificed. All those who fabricated this ideology, the idea of Russism for the physical violence over the Chechen people, all of them will maintain the low profile. I do not want to name their names, the court will identify them. But peace between Russia and Chechnya may only be established when these criminals are turned over to us. Or the international community will condemn them, or they will be turned over to us. The first condition, unconditional withdrawal of the Russian troops from the Republic's territory so that we could at least bury the fallen, formulate conclusions, and calculate the bills. The necessary condition is the reparations for all the damages, material and moral, that were inflicted yet again on our people. This is a necessary condition. And security guarantees of the international community to the citizens of the Chechen Republic and the territorial integrity of Chechnya. It is on these conditions that peace can be re-established. Without realization of these conditions, we will fight until we burn both Russia and Chechnya. Like a growing snowball, there will be no Russian state on this earth, neither will there be Chechnya. There is no other middle ground for Russia, nor is there any other chance for it. We have a chance, but they don't. You hope for the support of the international community? Without any doubt. Since the time of Adam and Eve, there was no a time when the whole globe, the population of the whole world, supported one side and treated the other with deep hatred. Only now such situation is possible when all the nations of the globe, independently of their religious beliefs, except for the atheist Russians who don't believe in anything, they try to mix all of it, Orthodoxy, Islam, war, but this is all bluff. There is no war between Islam and Orthodoxy or other Christianity. The Christian world, in its churches and Jewish synagogues and Buddhist temples, equally prayed to the Almighty to have pity on the Chechen people. And only in spiritless Russia no one prays, but wait for the destruction of the Chechen people. So this is not the war between Islam and Christianity. This is the war between believers and non-believers. The Satanists' Russism. Just as the whole world fought fascism, the same fight, but against Russism, is now taking place. And this fight will only intensify. And Russians are needlessly thinking that they will be able to intimidate the world with their army, criminals, and nuclear weapons. They will not. Everyone has gone through this hell of Russism, and Russia will either become a normal member of human civilization, or it will cease to exist as a state. And for this, humanity needs to create the world without opposing military alliances. Especially the Russian bloc with its Russism must be removed. Only one alliance is needed. There is NATO, and it needs to be strengthened. And let everyone join this single military alliance to protect the interests of all people of the globe. The weaker the state, the stronger must be its protection. Russia in such condition has no place as the permanent member of the UN Security Council. It is time to throw it out of there. Russia has no place at the United Nations in general. Of course we have hope in the world. Not because the world will have pity on Chechens and all, but because the humankind needs to defend itself from Russism. By placing themselves in Chechens' shoes today, the world will defend itself from the future destruction of Russianism. But enough time has lapsed since the beginning of the Chechen War to demonstrate the West's position more actively. I was asked this question before, but how many states are there in this world that would be capable to withstand the onslaught of such satanic, aggressive assault? 250,000 troops from submarine fleet to the Air Force have participated in the aggression against Chechnya. All of them. The war is going on for already half a year, and this war is not beneficial for Russia. And if Russians do not come to their senses, at least to guard themselves against the tragedy of war, then they need to understand that the red cock of war will enter their home. It will enter, and the Russian cities will burn if they do not wake up. When I said previously that the ground would burn under the feet of the aggressors, the journalists were skeptically commenting it, saying Dudaev warned, but the ground is not burning. As if opposition criminal forces are already approaching Grozny. The ground burned and the armor burned. And I say it again, if Russia does not wake up, its cities will burn in blue flames. And they're bringing this upon themselves with their own hands by encouraging criminality of their political leadership. And in regard to the activity of the international community, it has been satisfactory. The Baltic states' parliaments have considered the Chechen question. It is unprecedented for all members of parliaments of the Baltic states to discuss one single question that is not connected to their internal interests. And they legally recognized the fact of the Russian aggression against the Chechen Republic. This is a very important factor, and they passed it on for considerations to the United Nations. The US Congress considered this question on multiple occasions. The European Union, the scientists, 200 best sons of the world civilization, plus 52 European states and 82 states of the Islam world expressed their positions. It's Russia that just doesn't want to see the position of the international community, placing itself in a position of an ostrich, hid its head beneath itself and pretended the world does not see, does not do anything, and continues to broadcast its lies as usual. But the world sees the activities of the Russian leaders and its already criminal military, that they represent a very serious danger. I defend the world against this danger. I know this mechanism well. All those political opportunists of the highest echelon of Russian satanic power have run through my veins throughout these 4 years. And I am well aware of their intentions and plans for Europe, Asia, and the East. I know this from the original sources, and the world, if it is not vigilant, can bear the consequences of this aggression. Would you sit at a negotiation table with Hadjiev? And what is that? I disdain them. I would not only not sit with them now, but even 2 years ago, I would not sit with this category of people. I would not want to tarnish the nation by sitting with them at a negotiating table. With all those cheapskates, opportunists, you see, I do not belong to myself. As the elected leader, I must cherish the honor of the citizens and my people. I thought about this category of people. There are brilliant definitions of those who lost touch with their history and roots, of Sharikovs. They exist. Even vampires described by Gogol do exist. But none of these characters define them exhaustively. I came to a conclusion that the best definition is that of fleas and lice. Both fleas and lice infest unclean spots, especially fleas. Both suck blood. Both hide and stay in the dark. And when you discover them, you are disgusted and immediately want to squash them. But at the same time, you are aware that it will cause the bad smell. Perhaps when I have the time, I will describe a psychological portrait of this category of people. Do you think that if the Russians withdraw their forces from Chechnya, there will be a civil war in Chechnya? No, there will be no civil war. Because this category of people does not survive in clean spots. This category of little people, if I may call them that, will find themselves a spot corresponding to their needs, a filthy spot. No such spots will remain in Chechnya. They will have to find a place elsewhere, where they were born, where their nest is. There will they run. It is not easy in Chechnya, of course. As I said, 300,000 well armed adults that know only how to fight without the means to exist. There will be great difficulties. I'll tell you a secret. I am concerned about this situation. Let's say these cheapskates withdraw from Chechnya, so there is no more immediate and present enemy. What am I going to do with all these masses? No work, no roof. Many families are broken, killed, stabbed, raped, deported. What should I do with this mass of people? This is my great concern. And my head aches what to do when these criminals withdraw and there will be no more enemy factor. That will be the most difficult time for me, the most difficult time. But as far as the civil war is concerned, we will not let it happen. Spirituality is on the rise. It grows in geometrical progression, and where is spirituality, there is ethics and morality. I'm personally interested in continued confrontation until spirituality and morals dominate the whole mass of people. There is still an undecided category. We are from Pskov, so to speak, that are in search of an easy life, and this category will have to be cleaned up. It is either or, we cannot have it in the middle. And there are people that want to freely move goods, trade, but because of the war of this Chechen factor, they cannot do it and are thus angry at everybody. There are many of them. It is their problem. But first of all, a man must be preoccupied with the fate of his people, his nation, and his future. A man who only cares for his pocket and stomach perhaps does not need care from me. I do not take into consideration this category. My concern are regular citizens that are bearing terrible hardships of this rampant aggression with a smile on the face, not showing their pain. Recently, I met a woman about 70 years of age or so in the mountains alone. She came to me with a shy smile and hugged me. I asked where she was from. She said from Grozny, a village of Michurinsk. Her family perished, her sons perished, her husband died in a missile attack. But she said it was not that important. Such was the Almighty's will. I asked whether her home is intact. She said, I do not care. And then she says, tell me with your own lips just one thing, will we be under Russia or not? I said, it depends on the Almighty's will. I can only say from myself, never again will the Chechen people be under Russia. Never. And you could see how much she rejoiced. Not even a 16-year-old girl would jump with joy as she did. I heard it from your lips and I am happy. Don't you worry about the house and possessions. It is such a small thing. Let your head not ache about it. The most important thing is that your head aches so that we are not under these vandals. That is the task. From what you said above, does it mean that the war is promoting purification of the people? Yes, it does. You know, all our courts have paused their activities. What was expected? They thought that well armed, very bold, angry, we will squeeze them out into the mountains and they will begin killing each other in the forest. The morale will drop, they will start drinking and so on. Underway is such a spiritual purification that I can sincerely assure you that I did not expect such an effect even after decades. Right away, people introduced Sharia courts, so no alcohol is allowed, both those who sell and those who consume will be beaten with sticks. This is coercion, of course, and I thought that if we were to introduce it in the beginning, it would be met with disapproval. But here is an example. The sister was selling vodka. The brother came, laid down, and asked for a double dose for him and her. And then he said that if she does it again, I promise that she will lose her head. Another young man, handsome, himself asked that he be punished with the sticks because he had a drink last year. So they tell him that it has been a year already and you repented, so there should be no punishment. And he responds, I will have to answer before the Almighty. When I was drinking, I knew it was a sin, and that after drinking, I committed a misconduct. And instead of answering before the Almighty judgment that will be more severe, I would rather be held responsible here, go through this punishment so that my full repentance would reduce the Almighty's punishment. So he received his stakes, thanked those who executed the verdict, shaken their hands, hugged them, and left this way with peace in his soul. And this is where the nation, the people, is heading. This example is convincing and remarkable. Self-regulation is moving on. Spirituality and morality are growing in geometric progressions, and therefore strength to counter this aggression. Strength of countering the aggression. There are enough examples. Dzhokhar Musaevich, what would be your forecast for the next couple of months? I will keep my forecast to myself for now. My forecast is connected to my actions and plans that are being considered and must be implemented. So I will not rush with the forecast. But for the Chechens, the forecast is beneficial. For Russia, not beneficial. Dzhokhar Musaevich, you spoke of spirituality. Have you been a believer since childhood? Yes, as much as I remember myself, I was always a deeply faithful man. And I think it is absurd not to believe in your own Creator, who gives your life and takes it not according to your will. Not to believe in these powers is to be an animal. And to force oneself only to act in accordance with your own image and likeness and your own desires and fancies. That means to remove the deterring factor, which is spirituality, morality, and follow one's momentous fancy, lust, desires, not taking into consideration the wishes of other people, laws of nature and laws of the Almighty. I was deeply faithful and I remain deeply faithful. And I'm convinced, I feel and see that there are almighty powers at work that are beyond our control. Therefore, not to believe in them would mean to delude oneself. Generally speaking, not to believe in the almighty powers of one's Creator is simply foolish. It already becomes absurd when certain scientists tell us from the TV screen that man is God on earth because he's a creator. It is all laughable. I called on my academy members for a discussion. Come with your team of scientists, and I will be there with mine to talk about philosophy of life, laws of nature, laws of the Almighty, and we'll see where we stand. We prepared ourselves, they accepted the challenge with caution. And if it was not for this war, such discussion would have probably taken place. I'm ready with my team and challenge any team of the planet to discuss this problem. I'm certain that we will win the discussion. Where are the footsteps of Tatar-Mongols? Where is Mongolia now? What is it now? These Tamerlane's grasshoppers. Or the Byzantine Empire? Where it was and where did it disappear? Or the Ottoman Empire, where it was and whence did it disappear? By the same token, must the Russian Empire disappear? But the most misanthropic ideology has crystallized in Russism. It is rather late ideology that absorbed all the experience of the others, acquired dangerous weapons, and is using them. In today's TV program, some host announced that Dudaevites have used a 120mm weapon that is banned by the Vienna Convention. Oh my God. This is godlessness, cynicism, and bluff. So all that Russia is using is allowed by the Convention and by the Almighty? Russians have the right to kill children, destroy villages from the face of the earth, just because these Chechens fought the German fascism and contributed more than other Soviet subjects into development of the Soviet army. They are deported and deprived of the human right for life while working like bulls for the Soviet regime, pulling the sled. And so now they get a reward from the very army and these weapons from this Russism. So today's Russia is Carthage that must be destroyed, or it must become a democratic, lawful state. Well, there is no democracy there, but at least lawful, abiding by laws. Or this state must disappear from the map of history. There is no third option. Dzhokhar Musaevich, can you tell us something about Russian casualties, their numbers? I cannot tell anything about it because it gives me neither pleasure nor joy to count those killed and buried. You know what is most horrific is that the Russian side, who is sending their people to this butchery, treat them so immorally. They drop them in pits by hundreds, corpses rot, get eaten by dogs, cats. They demonstrate how ruthless they are towards their own and towards their enemies. These numbers do not honor us. And may Almighty allow as little as possible of them. Let them calm their conscience by this. Let them rejoice that the number of their killed in action is little, and the less they voice these numbers, the more I rejoice. Let there be less casualties. Dzhokhar Musaevich, is it possible that Russia's stand on Chechnya suddenly changes? Unexpected developments were always characteristic of Russian politics. Unpredictability, not unexpected developments. Lack of predictability. In order to change Russia's stand on Chechnya means to change the whole of Russia. It is not a momentary happening, Because look at how they prepared this plan. I know real well that in order for the general staff to plan for such a huge operation, down to smallest details, they would need to coordinate with all branches of power, from Duma to the executive branch, law enforcement, secret services, and military itself. It would have taken them years to plan, and it did. Chechnya is only a factor. Then there will be Caucasus, then the Baltic states, then the Middle Asia. What was planned for here? Adjaria, Abkhazia, Nagorno Karabakh, Lezginistan, taken from Dagestan and Azerbaijan, South Ossetia must be totally under Russian control, including Russian military bases on their territories. Then the coast of the Caspian Sea, including Lezginistan and perimeter up to Iranian borders. All workers that lost meaning and work in far north and far east in the Urals and in Siberia were intended to be moved here to change demographics, squeeze out Dagestanis and all from the Caspian coast into the mountains, and then take a look. We have demonstrated the map developed by the General Staff. There is no border between Chechnya and Dagestan there, including Khurzakh Cherkess hydroelectric plant. They were to be destroyed only by the airstrikes. This would include the Cherkess hydroelectric generating plant, the destruction of which would cause massive flooding. So all the industrial and natural potential would be destroyed, and leave the inhabitants of Caucasus in reality without Caucasus. That was the plan. And after that, Crimea. After the military campaign in Chechnya, all the forces had to be transferred to Crimea. In Lithuania and Belarus, there is a corridor of Kaliningrad district occupied by Russian forces that are not engaged. So the idea is to let them conquer, eat, steal, rape, kill, and thereby make a living. They have 2 naval bases in Latvia and 7 army bases. In Estonia, Narva region has to be captured and occupied. In Middle Asia, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan must be incorporated into new Russia as colonies. Wage war with the others using Kazakhstan and Middle Asia resources to fight each other. These are more or less plans till the end of 1995 that Russia had. Of course, Russia's plans and appetites were very wide even before, but they got derailed in Afghanistan. You know this anecdote. Here walks an ant with a bandage, and a mosquito asks him, "What's the matter with you, dear? What has happened to you?" "Well, I wanted to treat myself to a firefly, but it came out a burning cigarette butt." That's how they were derailed in Afghanistan, and their appetites subsided a little. But when they lost in Afghanistan, they decided to win Europe to their side. So they started flirting with Europe to become stronger, to the Indian Ocean, Middle East, Bosphorus, the Red Sea, and then slap Europe itself. Afghanistan, then other difficulties. Now Ichkeria. Ichkeria lowered their appetites a bit, but did not stop them. There will be butchery in Crimea. There will still be a war between Ukraine and Russia. As long as Russianism exists, it will not give up its ambitions. Right now, they're using the Slav ideology as they want to subdue, as before, Ukraine and Belarus. The idea is again to gain strength for further advances. But now no one wants to be a part of some union with Russia, neither in political, nor military, nor economic sense. They already learned their lessons. Russia is essentially a racketeer. By using threats, tanks, it extorts money. It is now threatening to transfer nuclear technology to Iran. So, if the civilized world is against it, it must pay Russia a compensation for its loss of its profit. This is racketeering, ordinary racketeering. Dzhokhar Musaevich, if these were the plans, why then dislodge such a powerful army? This army, the Soviet army, was the only containing factor for the political opportunists. The organized crime group that seized power in Russia. This army was capable of putting it in its place any political group. So the goal was to crash this Soviet army, make it subservient to the current regime, and that is precisely what they are doing. And this is what they are now doing with this army and their limitless appetites, in hopes that the threat of the former Soviet might will work for them. It won't. Because in order for this to work, one must have the idea, legitimate state, ideology, recognized internal and external policies, motives, stimuli. Then it will work, but it would not work in its current form. No foam, no bloody foam from the current Russian regime and their future regimes will change anything. No matter whom they elect, Russia's essence will not change anytime soon. Look at their Duma. It's the first provoking agent of this butchery. Look at what decision they pass. The ones that provoke encourage the executive branch. They provide a legal framework. There, take a look. I collected their documents, signed by Rybkin and his deputy Mityukov, and so on. They provoke the executive branch. You have information on how the presidential administration apparatus increased in response to it. Those who make fortunes out of the state of affairs cry out, "Let's accept the situation or there will be a civil war." These paid informants create informational background. There will be a threat to the regime if something changes because they became stronger, because they will lead them to slaughter. So, to prevent this, the status quo must be maintained. Russians must accept the current status quo and agree with their leadership. That is how they use realistic threats to control the inner situation in Russia, creating a certain informational background beneficial for the current regime. So they became even more rigid and created more organizational infrastructure. Political clans already have created their armed wings and will confront each other and scare people that if they challenge the existence balance of power, they will start fighting at people's expense. So everybody is quiet. Dzhokhar Musaevich, in the light of the above, Can it be deduced that the most pure structure in the USSR was the army? I can tell you that the Soviet army, despite all of its aggressive policies of the political leadership, despite totalitarianism, the Soviet army was the most, if not spiritually, then ideologically, maybe even morally fit among other armies. And it was probably the most viable element of the Soviet Union. Its personnel was really brought up with deeply ingested ideology of being the defenders of peoples of the motherland. The Soviet army did not engage into internal affairs of the state, but equally did it not allow the state to dominate itself and peoples of the USSR and to use violence against them. I have seen it myself in the Baltic states, in Siberia, wherever I served. For me and my subordinates, the rules were clear. Don't dare to usurp, rape. But now the army has become the foremost factor of violence. They turned the army in matter of months, 2 years, into a punishing organization. Look at the Navy officers. They're proud of executing punishing missions, and the media present it almost as heroic acts. Killing peaceful citizens that are unprotected by anything, by artillery fire or airstrike. They destroy entire towns, then they come in, rape and steal, taking everything, including soiled female underwear. Generals are involved in this. I would have never imagined it possible that a Soviet general would be stained by somebody else's underwear and looting. But now it became routine. It's a sickness.